High Commissioner Velthok stood before the gathered dignitaries of the hegemony, his scaled hands raised in triumph. The holographic displays surrounding the grand chamber showed their latest conquest. The burning cities of the Nyx Theory, their once proud crystalline spires now reduced to glittering dust. This marked the hegemony's 3,000th successful subjugation, a testament to their undisputed rule over the Orion Arm. "Let this victory herald another millennium of our supremacy," Velthok declared, his translator converting his clicking mandibles into the standard galactic tongue. The assembled representatives of the 7 species raised their appendages in celebration, their bioluminescent markings pulsing with pride. The celebration shattered as emergency alerts screamed through the chamber. The massive windows overlooking the capital world of New Genesis darkened automatically as a blinding flash lit up the sky. Space itself seemed to tear open, reality splitting along an impossible seam. "Report," Velthok demanded, his outer heart racing as the defense systems activated around the governmental complex. The planet's automated defense grid powered up, countless energy cannons tracking the anomaly. First Speaker Ixel's tentacles flew across the control interface. "Unknown spatial distortion. No match in our database. Energy signatures are." The analyst's voice trailed off, all 4 eyes widening. "Impossible." Through the rupture emerged a vessel that defied everything that hegemony knew about shipbuilding. No sweeping organic curves like their bioengineered ships. No crystalline geometry like the Nyx Theory craft they'd just destroyed. This was something else entirely, a brutalist monument of scared metal and exposed weapon systems. Its hull bore the marks of countless battles, each scar and impact crater telling a story of survival. "Magnification on the hull markings," Velthok ordered, his claws clicking against his ceremonial staff. The image zoomed in, revealing human script emblazoned across the battleship's side. THERMO Terran Expeditionary Force. Silence fell over the chamber. The Terrans, the primitive mammals they'd quarantined in their home system decades ago. Impossible. Their barrier fleet had contained them before they'd even achieved proper faster-than-light travel. The barrier fleet, Velthok suddenly remembered. Status of the barrier fleet. The communications officers worked frantically, but only static answered their calls. The entire containment force, 50 of their most advanced ships, had gone silent. The Thermopyla hung motionless above their capital, its size becoming apparent as planetary defense platforms struggled to get targeting locks. It was massive, easily twice the size of the largest hegemony dreadnought. Sensor scans bounced off its hull, providing contradictory readings that made no sense. "Their weapons systems," Second Speaker Mira reported, her crystalline form vibrating with tension. "They're unlike anything in our records. I'm seeing technology from a dozen different species, but modified, changed in ways that shouldn't be possible." Velthok felt his grip on power slipping as the assembled dignitaries began whispering among themselves. 3,000 conquered species, and none had ever reached their capital. None had ever bypassed their defenses so completely. "Open communications," he ordered, forcing confidence into his voice. "Remind these upstarts who rules the galaxy." The communications array activated, broadcasting on all known frequencies. "Unidentified vessel, you have entered hegemony space without authorization. Power down your systems and prepare for boarding, or..." The message cut off as every screen in the chamber flickered. The hegemony's most sophisticated encryption protocols crumbled in seconds. A new image appeared. A human female in a dark uniform adorned with unfamiliar insignia. Her expression carried the weight of authority that Velthok recognized from thousands of first contact scenarios. But there was something else there, something that sent a chill through his exoskeleton. She was smiling. "High Commissioner Velthok," Captain Amanda Sterling said, her voice carrying the same certainty he'd used to announce his victory moments ago. "We need to talk about the barrier fleet, or rather, what's left of it." The dignitaries watched in horror as footage began playing alongside her transmission. Hegemony ships torn apart by weapons they couldn't understand, their most advanced defense systems bypassed like they were children's toys. The date stamped showed this hadn't happened over weeks or days. The entire barrier fleet had fallen in under an hour. The stunned silence in the hegemony chamber lasted exactly 3 seconds before chaos erupted. Representatives of the 7 species began shouting over each other, their universal translators creating a cacophony of overlapping languages. Silence. Velthok roared, slamming his ceremonial staff against the floor. The sound echoed through the chamber, restoring the semblance of order. He turned back to the human's image, trying to hide his growing unease. These fabricated images do not impress us, Captain Sterling. The barrier fleet sent regular reports of our containment. Sterling interrupted, her smile widening. Tell me, Commissioner, when was the last time you actually spoke to those ships? Not just received their automated status updates, but made real contact. Velthok's mandibles clicked in agitation as he accessed his neural interface. The last direct communication had been. He felt his outer heart skip a beat. 2 years, first speaker Ixel whispered, tentacles curling in distress. We haven't had direct contact in 2 years. Sterling nodded, her image now accompanied by detailed schematics of hegemony vessels. Your ships were impressive. The first one we captured taught us so much about your technology. The second one, even more. By the 5th ship, she shrugged. Well, let's just say we got very good at making their automated systems report exactly what you expected to hear. Impossible. Second speaker Mira crystalline form vibrated with indignation. Our systems are protected by quantum encryption based on crystalline computing. Sterling finished. Beautiful technology. We integrated it into our own systems, much like we did with the biomechanical navigation from the Vorkath ships, the energy shielding from the Nixthuri, and dozens of other innovations we borrowed. The Thermopyla sensors suddenly activated, bathing the capital city in scanning beams that penetrated every defense. Data streamed across the chamber's displays, detailed readouts of their planetary defense grid, shield frequencies, command protocols, everything. Your barrier wasn't just ineffective, Sterling continued, her voice carrying the hint of genuine amusement. It was counterproductive. You gave us a perfect testing ground, a place to experiment with your technology without anyone noticing. Every scout ship you sent became another piece of the puzzle. Velthok felt the situation spiraling out of control. He gestured subtly to his security chief, who began transmitting emergency codes to the home fleet. If they could just keep the human talking until reinforcements arrived. I wouldn't bother with the fleet, Commissioner, Sterling said casually. They're a bit busy at the moment. New footage appeared, showing hegemony warships engaging. Copies of themselves. Perfect duplicates of their own vessels, moving with impossible precision, using their own tactics against them. Holographic projections, Velthok declared, but his voice lacked conviction. Captured ships, Sterling corrected. Amazing what you can do with a few command codes and some reprogrammed loyalty protocols. Your crews are safe, by the way. Everyone was evacuated before we took control. We're not monsters, after all. Her expression hardened slightly, unlike some species we could name. The chamber's security systems suddenly activated, kinetic barriers springing up between different sections. The representatives found themselves isolated, unable to coordinate. Velthok's neural interface went dead, cutting him off from the planetary defense grid. Now then, Sterling said, her tone becoming businesslike. Let's discuss the real reason we're here. The barrier fleet was just the beginning. We've spent decades studying your empire, learning its weaknesses, understanding how it maintains control. We know about the suppression protocols, the engineered dependencies, the calculated famines used to keep subject species in line. She leaned forward, and for the first time, the smile vanished completely. We know everything, Commissioner, and we've come to make some changes. Velfok's outer heart nearly stopped as new signals appeared on the tactical display. Hundreds of spatial distortions, identical to the one that had brought the Thermopylae, were opening across hegemony space. "This isn't an invasion," Sterling said quietly. "This is a revolution, and you're going to help us make it as bloodless as possible. For your own sake." The hegemony's grand chamber had transformed from a celebration hall into a war room. Emergency lights cast harsh shadows across alien faces as reports flooded in from across their territory. More human ships were appearing, not just battleships like the Thermopylae, but vessels of every size and configuration, each one a hybrid of stolen technologies remixed in ways that shouldn't have been possible. "You're probably wondering how we did it," Captain Sterling said, her image now projected life-size in the center of the chamber. She walked among the gathered representatives, as if she were really there, her hologram perfectly rendered. "How a primitive species managed to strip away everything you built over thousands of years." Velfok watched her movement, noting how even her hologram carried an unmistakable military bearing. "You had help," he accused. "Some of our subject species must have." "Oh, we had help," Sterling interrupted, stopping before him. "Yours." With a gesture, she brought up footage from across the galaxy. Hegemony shipyards, research facilities, military installations, all operating normally, yet something was wrong. Subtle changes in worker patterns, minor modifications to ship designs, tiny variations in security protocols. "Humans are really good at pattern recognition," Sterling continued. "Give us enough data, and we'll find the weaknesses, the gaps, the places where a little push can bring down an empire." She smiled. "Your barrier fleet gave us everything we needed. Every ship you sent to contain us became a library of information about your technology, your tactics, your culture." First Speaker Ixel's tentacles writhed in agitation. "But our ships were designed to self-destruct if captured. The crews were conditioned to die rather than be taken." "Yeah, we noticed that." Sterling's expression hardened. "That was your first mistake. You showed us exactly what kind of empire we were dealing with. After that, every life we saved from your conditioning became another ally. Every crew member we freed from your neural controls became a source of intelligence." The hologram shifted, showing human medical facilities where hegemony crew members were being treated. "We found ways to break your control protocols, to undo the neural programming. And you know what we discovered? Most of your people don't actually believe in the Empire. They just never had a choice." Velfok's claws dug into his ceremonial staff. "You expect us to believe that a single quarantine species orchestrated all this?" "Not just us," Sterling replied. A new series of images appeared, hundreds of alien species, many from worlds the hegemony had conquered generations ago. "We had help from every race you ever tried to break. The Nyx theory scientists you thought you'd wiped out, we found their hidden enclaves. The Vorkath warriors you reeducated. Turns out your programming wasn't as perfect as you thought." She gestured, and the tactical display updated, showing human ships moving into position across hegemony space. Each vessel was accompanied by smaller craft of various designs, ships crewed by members of supposedly subjugated species. "For the past 20 years, we've been building a network," Sterling explained. "Underground resistance cells, hidden research facilities, sleeper agents in your military. Every time you thought you were containing us, we were actually spreading, learning, preparing." The chamber's lights flickered as the Thermopylae's engines powered up, their unique signature making the very air vibrate. Outside, the massive ship began to move, taking up a new position directly above the government complex. "So, here's your warning," Sterling said, her voice carrying absolute certainty. "You have two options. Option 1. You help us dismantle this empire peacefully. We already control your military command codes, your neural networks, your planetary defense grids. You can't stop what's coming, but you can help make the transition bloodless." She paused, letting the words sink in. Option 2. You resist. You force use to demonstrate everything we learned from studying your wars, your weapons, your weaknesses. And trust me, Commissioner, you really don't want to see what humanity does when we're forced to fight. A hologram stepped closer to Velthok, close enough that he could see the battle ribbons on her uniform, each one marked with the name of a hegemony ship that had once been part of the barrier fleet. "You have 1 hour to decide," Sterling said softly. "Choose wisely." The hour passed in tense silence. High Commissioner Velthok stood before the gathered representatives, his mandibles clicking rapidly as he made his decision. "We will not bow to terrorists and thieves," he declared. "Launch the home fleet. All of it." Captain Sterling's hologram watched the declaration with an expression that might have been disappointment. "I was hoping you'd be smarter than this," she said quietly. "But I suppose every empire needs one last battle to understand it's over." The space around New Genesis erupted with light as 500 hegemony warships emerged from hyperspace. Each vessel was a masterpiece of bioengineered technology, the pride of 7 species' combined military might. They moved into attack formation with perfect precision, surrounding the Thermopylae in a 3-dimensional killing sphere. "Final warning," Sterling offered. "Stand down." Velthok's response was to order the fleet to open fire. Energy beams and plasma torpedoes converged on the human vessel from every direction, enough firepower to crack a small moon. The chamber's viewers automatically darkened to protect against the blinding flash. When the light faded, the Thermopylae hung unchanged. No shields were visible, no defense systems apparent. The barrage had simply failed to connect. "Interesting thing about your weapons," Sterling commented, as casual as if discussing the weather. "They're all based on the same basic principles, the same fundamental technologies." She smiled. "The same weaknesses." The Thermopylae's hull shifted, plates realigning as strange devices emerged. They bore elements of a dozen different species' technology, but reconfigured in ways that made no sense to hegemony engineers. "You see, while you were perfecting your current weapons, we were learning to counter them," Sterling continued. "And then we started wondering, what if we did more than just defend?" The devices activated, sending out waves of energy that rippled through space. Hegemony ships suddenly found their weapons powering down, their engines cutting out, their bioengineered systems going dormant. Neural interface failure. Weapons grid not responding. Hull integrity systems offline. The panic in the fleet commander's voices filled the chamber's communications channels. Sterling's hologram watched the chaos with professional interest. "We call it the shutdown wave," she explained. "Turns out when you base all your technology on the same principles, one countermeasure can affect everything." But that's not the impressive part. New devices emerged from the Thermopylae's hull, these clearly modified from hegemony designs. Energy beams lashed out, but instead of destroying the disabled ships, they began systematically disabling specific systems. "The impressive part is what we learned from your neural control protocols," Sterling continued. "How to override them. How to free your crews from conditioning while keeping them safe." Across the fleet, crews that had been programmed for generations to serve the hegemony suddenly found themselves able to think freely. The results were immediate and dramatic. "You should start getting some interesting communications right about now." As if on cue, signals began flooding in from the fleet. Ship after ship reporting crew rebellions, officers standing down, weapons being secured. Not by human forces, but by the hegemony's own people choosing to stop fighting. Velthok watched in horror as his mighty fleet effectively neutralized itself. No massive space battle, no glorious last stand, just the quiet end of control. "That's the thing about empires," Sterling said, her hologram now standing at the chamber's main viewport, watching the fleet power down. "They look invincible, until the moment people stop being afraid. You built your power on neural controls and forced loyalty. She turned to face the assembled representatives. We built ours on something you never understood. Choice. The Thermopila's engines pulsed, their unique signature now recognized as a combination of technologies from dozens of species, refined and improved by human innovation. Now then, Sterling's tone became businesslike. Shall we discuss the terms of your surrender? Or would you like another demonstration? The news spread faster than any quarantine could contain it, through hidden communication networks built over decades, across quantum channels the hegemony never knew existed. The message echoed. The Empire has fallen. In the hegemony chamber, Captain Sterling's hologram displayed feeds from across controlled space. Each image told the same story. Rebellion, awakening, freedom, but not the chaos the hegemony had always feared. This was something else entirely. You think this is spontaneous? Velfok demanded, watching as another sector declared independence. These coordinated strikes, these organized rebellions. Sterling nodded to one of the feeds showing a Nix-Theri crystal city. Former slaves moved with military precision, securing vital infrastructure without a single casualty. 20 years of planning, she explained. While your barrier fleet thought they were watching us, we were building this. A network of resistance cells, training programs, supply lines. The displays shifted to show massive underground facilities on supposedly primitive worlds. Hidden shipyards where hybrid vessels were under construction. Training centers where former slaves learned to use modified hegemony technology. Every scout ship you sent to Earth didn't just give us technology, Sterling continued. It gave us star charts, communication protocols, supply routes. She gestured to another feed showing a hegemony supply convoy peacefully surrendering to ships of clearly human design. We mapped your entire empire from the inside out. First Speaker Ixel's tentacles curled in disbelief. But the neural controls, the conditioning, were the first thing we learned to break. Sterling interrupted. A new image appeared. Medical facilities across the galaxy where former hegemony servants were being freed from their neural programming. Turns out when you build an empire on forced loyalty, all it takes is one way to break those chains. The chamber's screens filled with more footage. Vorkath warriors teaching human combat techniques to former slaves. Nix-Theri scientists working alongside human engineers to modify stolen technology. Species that the hegemony had pitted against each other for generations now fighting side by side. The amazing thing, Sterling said, walking among the stunned representatives, is how many of your own people helped us once they were free. Officers, scientists, workers. Turns out most of them never wanted to be part of an empire. They just never had the choice. A new alert flashed across the displays. Deep space sensors detected massive fleet movements, but not hegemony reinforcements. These were liberation forces, ships of mixed human and alien design emerging from hidden bases across the galaxy. You didn't just lose your fleet today, Sterling explained, her voice carrying a hint of pride. You lost every hidden facility we've infiltrated, every supply line we've compromised, every world where we've spent years building underground networks. The tactical display updated, showing the true scope of the revolution. It wasn't just military targets, economic systems, communication networks, trade routes. Everything the hegemony had used to maintain control was being systematically dismantled or repurposed. This isn't just about military power, Sterling said, turning to face Velfok directly. It's about something you never understood, the power of choice, of cooperation, of different species working together because they want to, not because they're forced to. One of the feeds showed the Thermopila's sister ships emerging across hegemony space. Each one served as a command center for the liberation, coordinating with ground forces that had been preparing for this moment for years. Your empire was built on control, Sterling concluded, as reports of peaceful surrenders continued to flood in. Ours is built on something stronger, hope. The hope that different species can work together, that we can build something better than an empire. She turned to the gathered representatives, many of whom were already receiving messages from their own worlds about military units standing down, neural controls failing, and populations rising up. "So here's your new choice," Sterling offered, her hologram's eyes meeting each alien gaze in turn. "You can either help us build that better future, or you can watch from the sidelines as we build it anyway." The deepest levels of the hegemony archives lay beneath the capital city, protected by security systems from a dozen worlds. As Captain Sterling's hologram led the way through the darkened corridors, emergency lighting cast strange shadows on walls that hadn't seen visitors in centuries. "Your security was impressive," Sterling commented, watching as human technicians worked alongside liberated hegemony archivists. "But you made one crucial mistake. You kept records of everything." Velfok moved stiffly, surrounded by his former guards who now served as his escorts. "These archives are just historical data," he insisted, "nothing of military value." Sterling stopped before a massive door covered in biomechanical locks. "Then why did your predecessor order Earth's quarantine after accessing this specific section?" The door opened with a hiss of ancient mechanisms. Inside, quantum computers hummed as they processed data streams that had been running uninterrupted for millennia. On the central display, a single file glowed: Species Threat Analysis. Classification Level: Omega. "We found references to this in the first scout ship we captured," Sterling explained, as human technicians began accessing the system. "Took us years to piece together what it meant. Why an advanced empire would be so afraid of a pre-FTL species that they'd commit an entire fleet to containing us." The ancient displays flickered to life, showing predictions and probability matrices that stretched across centuries. Velfok's outer heart nearly stopped as he recognized the data, the hegemony's most closely guarded secret. "You weren't just running simple predictions," Sterling said, her voice quiet with understanding. "You were gaming out every possible future for every species you encountered, looking for threats to your control." The displays showed thousands of simulated timelines, each one tracking the development of different species. Most followed predictable patterns: technological advancement leading to either peaceful integration or successful subjugation. But Earth's timelines were different. Human development was unlike anything you'd seen before, Sterling continued, as the data streamed past. Most species specialized, became either warriors or scientists, conquerors or creators. But humans did both, Velfok finished, his mandibles clicking in agitation. Simultaneously, the simulation showed human history in stark detail, periods of brutal warfare interspersed with magnificent achievements, weapons of mass destruction developed alongside medical breakthroughs, warships carrying solar satellites, soldiers protecting scientists. Every other species followed a linear path, Sterling observed, but humans learned to be both sword and shield, creator and destroyer. Your predictions showed that if left unchecked, we'd eventually develop technology that combined the best elements of every species' achievements. New data appeared, projections showing how humans would adapt and improve technology from other worlds. The hegemony's worst fears laid bare in quantum calculations. "The quarantine wasn't to protect us from the galaxy," Sterling said, understanding dawning in her eyes. "It was to protect your empire from what we'd become. You saw that we'd not only match your technology, but transform it into something new, something you couldn't control." Velfok watched as the final projections played out, scenarios showing humans dismantling the hegemony's power structure not through brute force, but through innovation and adaptation. "But you made a critical error in your calculations," Sterling noted, studying the data. "You assumed isolation would slow us down. Instead, it gave you time to prepare," Velfok whispered. "Time to plan, to build, to perfect your strategies without interference." Sterling nodded, her hologram casting no shadow in the archive's ancient light. "We found ways to capture your scout ships without being detected, learned your technology without you realizing, built an alliance of resistance forces right under your sensors. She turned to face the former High Commissioner. Your own predictions warned you that we do exactly this. That humans don't just adapt. We transform everything we touch, technology, tactics, even entire societies. The final display showed the current situation. Humanity's carefully orchestrated revolution, unfolding exactly as the ancient computers had predicted centuries ago. You tried to cage a species that specializes in breaking cages, Sterling concluded. And in doing so, you gave us everything we needed to break yours. The Thermopyla's war room had been transformed. Where tactical displays once tracked fleet movements, now they showed reconstruction efforts across former hegemony space. Representatives from 30 different species gathered around the holographic table, their neural controls removed, their minds truly free for the first time in generations. Captain Sterling stood at the head of the table, her actual presence somehow more commanding than her hologram had been. The revolution was the easy part, she said, bringing up a galaxy map showing hundreds of worlds in transition. Building something better, that's the real challenge. Why should we trust humans to lead? A Vorkath warrior demanded, his ritual scars gleaming. You prove your military might. But we're not here to lead. Sterling interrupted. We're here to share. She activated a new display, showing something that made even the former hegemony representatives lean forward in surprise. This is Earth's history, she explained. Not the sanitized version your archives had. The real story, including every mistake, every war, every time we nearly destroyed ourselves. The displays showed humanity's bloodiest conflicts, their greatest failures, their hardest lessons. Nuclear devastation, environmental disasters, genocides and wars that nearly ended their civilization. We're not here because we're perfect, Sterling continued. We're here because we learned from our mistakes. Because we found ways to build alliance from conflict, unity from division. She brought up new images, the United Nations, the European Union, international space programs. Before we ever reached the stars, we had to learn how different cultures could work together without losing their identity. How former enemies could become allies without sacrificing their pride. The room was silent as the representatives watched centuries of human history unfold. They saw how nations that once waged total war eventually built lasting peace. How cultures that seemed incompatible found ways to cooperate while maintaining their uniqueness. The hegemony built its power on forced unity, Sterling explained. We're proposing something different. A galactic cooperative based on choice, on mutual benefit, on the understanding that we're all stronger together than apart. The holographic table shifted, showing a new organizational structure. Not the rigid hierarchy of the hegemony, but an interconnected network of worlds and species, each maintaining their sovereignty while participating in a larger alliance. Every world gets a voice, Sterling detailed. Every species keeps its independence. We share technology, resources, knowledge. Not because we're forced to, but because it benefits everyone. She brought up specific examples. Human medical techniques combined with Nyx Theory crystal technology, creating revolutionary healing methods. Vorkath battle strategies merged with Earth military doctrine, producing better defense systems. Former hegemony bioengineering repurposed for environmental restoration. Look at what we've already achieved together. Sterling gestured to the hybrid ships in orbit, the combined technology that had defeated the hegemony. This was just the beginning. Imagine what we could do if we all worked together by choice. The representatives began to engage, offering suggestions, pointing out challenges, proposing solutions. The war room became a planning center for something unprecedented, a true alliance of equals. We're not just dismantling an empire, Sterling said, watching the species that had been enemies for centuries now working together. We're building a future where every voice matters, where every culture contributes, where innovation comes from cooperation instead of control. The displays showed the Thermopyla's sister ships across the galaxy, each one serving not as a symbol of dominance, but as a hub of reconstruction and cooperation. Former hegemony worlds were already reaching out, asking to join the new alliance. "The choice is yours," Sterling concluded, looking at each representative in turn. "You can hold on to old hatreds, old fears, old ways of thinking, or you can help us build something new, something that takes the best of every species and makes it better." She smiled, and for the first time, it held no trace of the warrior who had challenged an empire. This was the smile of someone who could see a better future taking shape. So, who's ready to build that future together? 1 year after the Thermopylae first appeared above New Genesis, the planet hosted a very different gathering. The former seat of the hegemony had been transformed into the central hub of the galactic cooperative, its oppressive architecture softened by elements from 100 worlds. Captain Sterling stood at the observation deck, watching ships from across the galaxy move through the busy space lanes. Vessels of every design and origin worked together in perfect harmony. Human ships alongside modified hegemony cruisers, Nyx-Theri crystal ships next to Vorkath battlecruisers. "Did you ever doubt it would work?" Former High Commissioner Velthok asked, approaching with the measured steps of someone still adjusting to freedom from neural controls. His role now was that of a cultural advisor, helping other species understand and move past the hegemony's legacy. Sterling watched as a fleet of training vessels passed by, crews of mixed species learning from each other's strengths. "Not after we saw your archives," she replied. "Your own predictions showed that different species working together by choice would be stronger than any forced unity." The Thermopylae hung in high orbit, no longer a weapon of war, but a living museum. Its halls now hosted delegates from newly joined worlds, showing them how humanity had turned stolen technology into tools of liberation. The children asked different questions now, Velthok noted, his mandibles moving in what Sterling had learned was amusement. They don't want to know about battle tactics or weapon systems. They ask how humans knew it would work. How you planned it all. Sterling smiled, remembering the long years of preparation, the careful building of networks, the patient waiting for the right moment. "We had good teachers," she said. "Every species that helped us, every piece of technology we adapted, every lesson from our own history, it all showed us what was possible." Below them, the central hub buzzed with activity. Former enemies worked side by side, combining their knowledge and capabilities in ways the hegemony had never imagined possible. The feared chaos of freedom had instead produced an explosion of creativity and innovation. "Look at that." Sterling pointed to a new ship design emerging from the cooperative shipyards. It combined hegemony bioengineering, Nyx-Theri crystal technology, Vorkath weapon systems, and human adaptability into something entirely new. That's what happens when we work together, when we choose to build instead of control. The ship was the first of its kind, a deep space exploration vessel crewed by members of 20 different species. Its mission was to reach beyond known space, not to conquer or control, but to learn and understand. "The quarantine gave us time," Sterling continued, watching the ship prepare for its maiden voyage. "Time to learn from Earth's mistakes, to study your technology, to build our networks. But most importantly, it gave us time to understand what real power is." She turned to face Velthok. "It's not about having the strongest weapons or the most advanced technology. It's about bringing out the best in each other, about building something together that none of us could create alone." The observation deck filled with representatives gathering for the cooperative's next session. Species that had been mortal enemies under the hegemony now worked together on projects that benefited all. The feared chaos of freedom had given birth to an ordered complexity that surpassed anything force could have achieved. "One ship," Velthok mused, looking up at the Thermopylae. "One ship changed everything." Sterling shook her head. "Not the ship," she corrected. "The idea it represented. That different species could work together as equals. That we could learn from each other, grow together, build something better than an empire." As if to emphasize her point, A group of young aliens rushed past, wearing the uniforms of the new cooperative academy. Humans studied alongside former hegemony species, each learning from the other's strengths and perspectives. "That's our real victory," Sterling said, watching the future take shape before her eyes. Not breaking an empire, but building a future where every species can reach its full potential. Together. The Thermopylae caught the light of the setting sun, its battle scars now badges of honor in a galaxy learning to turn ancient wounds into bridges between worlds.